I'd like to welcome all the attendees who joined us today on our webinar. It's the second edition of Wealth Management Consultants webinar. We'll be focusing on Vietnam promising FDI investment, market opportunities and government strategies. I'd like to start by welcoming our panelists. Dr. Ashraf Mahati, the Chief Economist in Trade and Export and Market Development in the Government of Dubai. Mr. Kwan, the Managing Director of Alpha Partners in Vietnam. Mr. Sami Kapbara, Partner in Capitoria. And Mr. Ha, the Chair and CEO of TAM Viet Investment Advisory. I'd like to start by raising a question to Dr. Ashraf. Doctor, you have a great experience when it comes to Vietnam economy due to your experience in international export areas. Can you please give us your feedback on how trade played a role in boosting FDI into Vietnam? Please, the table is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sultan. It's certainly a pleasure to be here this morning. Dubai Exports, the agency that I actually represent, we carried out a number of trade missions to Vietnam, not just to Ho Chi Minh City, but actually also the northern side. So we have actually a good idea of the kind of work that has taken place. And before I talk about the FDI aspect, one has to understand why FDI takes place. And location aspects are, of course, very, very important, but it's also the in-country and the near-country opportunities that encourage somebody to actually invest in a country. When we looked at Vietnam, and in fact, the first trade mission that we went there quite a few years ago, and since then we've done a number of activities, what we saw was the economic dynamism in the country. Since the 1990s, economic growth has consistently increased in the country. The latest data shows 7% growth in GDP, which in today's world is amazing. When we look at per capita income, it's in the region of $2,700, and again increasing. The population is one of the biggest factors as to why somebody would want to invest in the country and also do trade opportunities with the country. 70% of the population is under 35 years old. Now that has two advantages from the way that we look at it. First, we see great future increase in demand, because when population increases and when you have a low or a lower age group of population, you have a much longer buying trend. And secondly, that buying trend becomes more homogeneous globally. And again, one of the reasons for saying that, look at us today. We are across 4 different continents participating in today's seminar, right? So the internet, social media plays a very, very important role in homogenizing our demand. And then we look at the middle class, 13% currently. Our own projections show that this is soon going to double. And the middle class is where you have the highest disposable income, but not only the income, but the willingness to spend. The lower end buy essentials, the upper end invest money. The middle class earn and spend. So that's why the middle class has always been our focus. And then I can give you wonderful things like the increase in the human capital index, second ranking in ASEAN. And then we looked at the growth of urbanization, how urbanization has played a major role. And again, we have the export growth, increase in tourism. And that again also links very nicely to the kind of investment that various entities from Dubai have done or have carried out in Vietnam, various different parts of Vietnam. And these are well publicized without me having to go into each of the details. But what I want to focus more is the reasons. And then if you look at near country, you invest in a country not only for the country in-country opportunities, but the near country opportunities. And what we find in Vietnam is so well connected with Cambodia next door, Laos. And also, if you want to export and do business with China, you have very good connectivity. So for us, it was a complete package. And Vietnam offered us this complete package to not only utilize the in-country benefits, but the near-country benefits. And that's why you see tremendous increase in FDI from the UAE to Vietnam, but more importantly, trade, because trade is the first step to FDI. I think I'll stop there and I can take questions as well.
Thank you, Dr. Ashraf. We'll keep the question to the end. We'll move to Mr. Kwan. Mr. Kwan, in the past few years, Vietnam showed a tremendous growth in all sectors, which resulted to a huge jump in the GDP of the nation. Can you elaborate more on how government strategies helped in this growth, please?
Thank you, Mr. Sultan, for the questions. And as Dr. Ashraf just mentioned about Vietnam's success over the past 15 to 20 years in sustaining strong GDP and economic growth. As you may all know that Vietnam has sustained very robust economic growth, about 6.5 to 7% of GDP growth per annum over the past 5 years. And in order to do that, the Vietnam's government has contributed in many ways in opening up the investment policies and other fiscal policies to attract investment, as well as to facilitate the establishment of the new business. Even though in 2020 we have been hit by the coronavirus worldwide, however, we expected that the country GDP in the first 6 months of 2020 has surged about 1.81%, and it's expected to close the year at 4.1%, with a GDP scale of about $262 billion. And the Vietnam government has, I believe, I must say that Vietnam's government has succeeded in stabilizing the macroeconomy, controlling inflation, as well as the managing fiscal policies. Among those policies, I must say the Vietnam's government really focusing on boosting the private sectors. A lot of the strong movement and activities also that they, to help the private sector to be born and thrive, which led to the strong consumption power as well as more jobs to be created. And most recently, the Politburo of the government had issued the resolution number 50 to facilitate the investment sector and to improve and boosting the investment climate in the next in the vision from 2020 to 2030. And with all having said that, we look forward to Vietnam will sustain its strong economic growth in the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you, Mr. Kwan. I'll move now to Mr. Sami. Mr. Sami, technology startup is your focus area as an investor, and Vietnam showed a huge growth in the tech side. Do you think investing in Vietnam startups is something appealing? Please, the table is yours.
Thank you, Sultan. Thank you and the whole team for having me on this webinar. So look, by way of background, as you said, I'm a partner at Capitoria. We are early stage technology investors. Over the last 3 years, we've made 165 investments, largely in seed and Series A technology companies. We have a global mandate and we're sector agnostic, but about 90% of our investments have been in the US so far. And we haven't invested in Vietnam yet, but we are very interested. And of late, we've been developing our network of contacts with partners to find interesting deals in Vietnam. So it's definitely very much on the radar. Look, very briefly, I'll touch upon a few things on the macro level, as Dr. Ashraf and Kwan just did. Vietnam is undeniably following China's growth trajectory. The GDP growth between 1990 and 2018 was the third fastest globally. And Vietnam's economy is projected to grow to $3 trillion by 2050 on a PPP level. And that's expected to be over 5% growth over that duration. But more interestingly, I'd say there's an abundant pool of talent with over 50,000 newly qualified engineers per year. And recently, specifically in the technology space, we've seen companies like Sequoia, Goldman Sachs, GIC lead significant investments in Vietnam. We obviously look at how the digital economy is growing, and we've seen over 20% growth per annum in Vietnam. And a recent report from Bain and Google shows that Vietnam's digital GMV, its digital gross merchandising value, stood at $3 billion in 2015, $12 billion in 2019, and is expected to reach $45 billion by 2025. So in the span of 10 years, Vietnam's digital economy is expected to grow 15 times. That is nothing short of amazing. We've also seen a 22 times growth in its internet users in the last 15 years. And a fun fact, Vietnam is the 5th largest country in terms of YouTube consumption globally. But just lastly, a few points on investments from technology firms. Last year, SoftBank led Sendo's Series C, Sendo, the e-commerce platform, and they raised $61 million. We also saw S-Commerce, the logistics provider for e-commerce platforms, raise $100 million from Temasek and others. And VNPay, the online payment solution, raised $300 million in a deal led by GIC and the Vision Fund. So in terms of venture capital, to answer your question specifically, Sultan, in 2017, Vietnam witnessed 30 venture capital deals for a total of about $50 million. The year later, in 2018, there were about 50 venture capital deals totaling $290 million. And last year, Vietnam witnessed 90 venture capital deals for a total of $750 million. So you see a 15 times increase in the amounts invested in technology in Vietnam only in the last 3 years. So you ask me, is investing in technology in Vietnam appealing? I think the numbers speak for themselves, and I don't have much more to say.
Thank you, Mr. Sami. Yes, of course, Vietnam is booming in technology. Vietnam showed a great success steps in technology, and they are now one of the leaders of technology in the Asian market. I'll move to Mr. Ha, the chairman and CEO of Tam Viet Investment Advisory. What made Vietnam, Mr. Ha, the destination of international investors? Why it surpassed other Asian nations?
Yes, thank you so much for very interesting question, and also very highly evaluate Vietnam over Asian birds. I think one of the crucial element is like for the last 10 years, government introduced very, opening up the economies. As you may know, Vietnam economy is like the most second open economy in Southeast Asia. We are the second to sign the EV FTA with Europe. And the total export and import over GDP is 250%, right? So as the government push for the very opening up the economy, the FDI sector play like very important role, is like 40% of the output. So the institutional reform also had been implemented strongly, because the economy is tied up with the rule of law by your international standard. When we join the EV FTA or the bilateral trade agreement. And I think that's one of the key issue why Vietnam, is become very attractive destination for foreign investor. That's why I work with a lot of Korean investor, Japanese investor, Singaporean investor, and recently Indian investor. They come to Vietnam to explore about IT sector. They explore about power sector, renewable energy, gas-fired energy, pharmaceutical, IT sector, and maybe Sami, talk about the tech investment, the huge amount in investment, coming in Vietnam for the last 3-4 years. It's amazing that Vietnam market is now from the frontier market, and we will become the emerging market very soon in the next couple of years. And then I think that's Dr. Ashraf mentioned about a lot of macro favorables and macro fundamentals, but I think the way government push the economy tie up with international standard, more opening up, and then let the people, the senior business management to interact with international standard. That play crucial role in pushing our economy go ahead and then become very attractive destination for foreign investor.
Thank you, Mr. Ha. I'll move again to Dr. Ashraf. Dr. Ashraf, my second question is, where do you see Vietnam in the next 10 years? And will Vietnam become one of the biggest Asian economies?
I think here the big elephant in the room is how a country deals with the problem of COVID. I think what COVID has done is actually changed the whole world, right? And I'll explain just very briefly because everybody is aware the whole world has experienced this. And the way that you manage the transformation post-COVID is a real issue, because the way that COVID has changed things is that we have seen a different life, right? And when you see something, you cannot unsee it. I mean, typical examples, I traveled from the UAE to London, and at every point you're sanitizing, you're going through different processes. So it's how you actually change and make yourself relevant. And that's the key I want to emphasize, right? It's maintaining your relevance in the new world, right? Now, do I think Vietnam can do this? Yes, definitely. I think Sami mentioned the 250,000 engineers coming out. He talked about digital trade increasing 15%. Yes, these are the drivers, but look at the strategic location of Vietnam, right? Okay, this is again a real driver, even in the post-COVID world. Look at how the ease of doing business. Each year, Vietnam is increasing the ease of doing business. The number of trade agreements. I mean, I'm passionate about trade, right? And I think the driving force to increasing trade and creating a trade-led growth is the number of trade agreements you enter into and how relevant these trade agreements are. Kwan talked about growth, economic growth. There is stable GDP growth. And then again, the openness to trade and the acceptability of FDI, right? For me personally, I actually believe Vietnam is the next factory of the world, right? And I think this is a changing force. Growing population, young and very dynamic population. I think this means that for me personally, we see Vietnam as the next leading star. In fact, it's already there. It's that it's going to make a tremendous climb. Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor. I'll go back to Mr. Kwan. Mr. Kwan, my question is, can you please elaborate more on the government initiatives towards FDI? And what is the role of the Vietnamese private sector in empowering these initiatives? You know, the government will lay out initiatives, but if the private sector does not collaborate with the government, the growth cannot happen. So please, if you can emphasize more on this topic.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sultan, for the questions. Before I go into answering about the elaboration of the government strategy and initiatives and how the private sectors will collaborate with the government to impose the policy to attract investment, I would like to continue the story and the conversation of the Dr. Ashraf about the maintaining the relevance in the new world and the switch of the manufacturers from China, India to other emerging markets because of the COVID-19, as well as of the cost reductions and the cheap labor cost and production efficiency. But the questions, and I also always ask my clients and the business owners are we really able to catch that kind of wave from China or India? Are we competing with other emerging markets like Indonesia? The country has 270 million populations with a high GDP per capita. And then how Vietnam can win this kind of competition over other emerging markets are the really critical questions. Not only the private sector, but also the government of Vietnam need to be really mindful of to tackle these kind of challenges. And I believe that the Vietnam government is quite aggressive and really responsive in tackling these kind of challenges to attract the manufacturing investment from China and India. The government most recently set up a task force to improve or to boost the investment and to attract the investment from other countries. And the task force mission will be focusing on removing the investment bottlenecks, such as the simplification of the administrative procedures to help the FDI enterprises to come in Vietnam much easier with less downtime, with less costs. And the second is to continue to update the changes of the foreign investment policies to how the global market is working and how Vietnam's can adapt to it. And third is the government need to be really proactive and flexible to give out the initiative and the measures to help both the domestic private sectors and the FDI enterprises to work together and to empower, to embrace the new way of the economic. And lastly, I believe that the domestic private sectors needs to be really go hand in hand with the government at all levels to update the government what should be done and how the government and the private sector could be cooperate in the near future to really drive the growth and the investment climate of Vietnam.
Thank you, Mr. Kwan. Moving again to Mr. Sami. Mr. Sami, my second question is, what will be the areas you want to explore in Vietnam in technology? And want to know as an investor to invest in Vietnam. So what do you require from the Vietnamese market to invest into Vietnam?
Thank you, Sultan. So look, in terms of what we're going to be looking for from a technology perspective, we're agnostic. So really any technology that makes sense, but we're big fans of marketplaces and fintech. And as per the examples that I mentioned before, there's some really impressive development happening in that space. I think more importantly, what I'd like to focus on is what do we look for as foreign investors, specifically in that space. And look, the reality is this is no different to any other foreign investor investing in any other type of sector. The number one thing that we're looking for is safety. How safe is an investment that we're making into the country? And that represents itself in many number of ways, but first and foremost, how solid and sound is the legal system? But also, is there volatility around the regulatory environment? And that's a very important point, because regulatory environment can kind of make or break the attractiveness of investing in a specific sector in a given country. I'll give you one example. In the last couple of years, we invested in two companies, two motorbike ride-hailing companies in emerging markets, not too dissimilar to Vietnam, one in Africa and one in Latin America. I'll speak about the one in Latin America. I mean, it was experiencing tremendous growth. We invested as seed investors at a roughly $15 million valuation. The business surprised everybody with its performance, and its Series A valued it at $80 million. However, overnight, the government decided to ban ride-hailing, really for political reasons, to help the taxi unions. So Uber had to leave, and all the other ride-hailing companies had to leave right away. So, you know, you go from a company being worth 80 million to next day nothing, because, you know, the government essentially killed that sector. The problem is that although I may understand the political desires to do this, but it sets a very bad precedent because it damages the appetite for foreign investors to commit investments into the tech space and potentially also other sectors. I think also, and we've covered this, but macroeconomic factors are obviously important, and luckily for Vietnam, this is looking very good. Growth rates, GDP, etc. But we also look at currency risk. You know, foreign investments are often in dollars, while earnings of local tech companies would be in dong. About 10, 15 years ago, the dong was hovering at 14,000 to 18,000 to the dollar, and it's now at about 23,000. So that's an important element to consider as well. And then lastly, look, talent pool. From what we've seen, countries with most exciting technology prospects have burgeoning talent pools. And we're very fortunate to see an exciting growing talent pool in Vietnam. So look, overall, we think Vietnam is really well positioned to keep on attracting a lot more investments in its technology space.
Thank you, Sami. I'll move to Mr. Ha now and follow with a question related to what we got from Mr. Sami as an answer. Can you please just give us some insights on sectors that showed a huge growth and an interest to the foreign investors? And can you please also elaborate on sectors that are emerging now in Vietnam? So I'd like to know, foreign investors, what are their focus areas in Vietnam and what's coming up in Vietnam in the coming future?
Yes, what a pity is that I have only 10 minutes for this topic, because a lot of potential industry in Vietnam, manufacturing, power and pharmaceutical agriculture. Right, just one, we have one tech guy here, so he have a lot of information and see a lot of interest for a tech firm. But so I should talk about more traditional industry. For example, power industry. For the last 5 years, the growth of the demand consumption is like more than 10%, 11-12%, and is expected to keep that pace. Of course, post-COVID period maybe from next year. And we for the last 5-6 years we have no coal-fired thermal power plants added to the system. We have only wind and solar, and the total capacity added into the system is not sufficient. And we see the very huge demand shortage in the next 3 to 5 years. That's why the foreign investor rushing into gas-fired thermal power plants. Investor from Thailand, Korea, USA, and Japan. They it's like racing for register for the big gas-fired Zemor power plant with the total capacity of each project is like 1,000 megawatt with the total investment is billion US dollar. And they want to, get in the market in the, pick up the demand in the next 5 years. Of course, power industry in Vietnam is like still obligaristic. It's not competitive yet, but government, push the regulations, so liberalize the market and let the tariff, electricity tariff, gradually increase, because now electricity tariff in Vietnam is lower comparing to the Southeast Asian peer like Thailand or Indonesia. So it is this very, very potential, and many big investors like Gulf from Gulf Energy Development from Thailand, Capco, a couple of US investors like AES and ExxonMobil. They ready to jump in the market, from and join this opportunity. That's for power industry. And as a second industry, I see also a huge interest from foreign investors is like pharmaceutical. Pharmaceutical industry in Vietnam, experiencing 8 to 9% growth for the last 5 to 10 years, and expect to keep that growth rate in the next 10 years, because the per capita spending for pharmaceutical in Vietnam comparing to Thailand and Indonesia is like half a bit. So Korean pharmaceutical company, Japanese and US, Indian companies, they join the market, and they also try to not only to distribute their products, but try to build their plant or acquire local company. Even in this very challenging macroeconomic environment, still pharmaceutical companies coming in, because pharmaceutical company to ask for investment opportunity, because pharmaceutical and electricity, they are defensive industry, utilities, and it's long-term play. And that the two in the industry I most favor. And also one of the potential industry is agriculture industry. Agriculture industry in Vietnam, we have like very natural advantage of fishery and fruit, but we for the last 10 years we export, but we export raw product. But if foreign investors, they have good capital, good technology, and they have secured output in Europe market or US market, it's very huge opportunity for them to invest in Vietnam to produce processed foods, like from the mango, from coconut. They can process like very delicious juice to sell in Europe or US. I think that's a very, very potential. And also given the EVFTA, we the second country in Southeast Asia to sign with Europe, and also the intensified trade war between US and China. I definitely I believe that a lot of people, the most favorite industry by myself, and when we keep a huge interest from foreign investors.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ha. Now we'll move to Q&A. I'll move the table to Mr. Lorenzo. Lorenzo, you can lead, please, and share the audience Q&As, please.
Hello, hello. Good morning and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you very much to joining us, to all the attendees and the panelists. It's really interesting topics that we are discussing today over here. We have actually a lot of questions, and I try to, of course, match the question with the answer that you already gave in your speech. I already prepared some of these questions to all of you, and I would like to start with one, please. We all of us know that for any kind of investor, when you approach a new market, a new country, you start looking at the infrastructure to understand how these are the support for any level of the investment. So we have a specific question about the transportation infrastructure. So is the transportation infrastructure in Vietnam in this current situation, in this moment, able to support the investment, and there are enough investment in the country and interest of the government to increase and to grow the infrastructure transportation inside the country?
Thank you for the questions. So I think it's very interesting and challenging question to answer from a point of view. As far as I know, Vietnam is the top nations in terms of spending on infrastructure I must say in Southeast Asian countries. Over the past, I must say 5 to 10 years, the government spent a lot of money on expanding roads, building highways, and not only highways and roads, but also in ports, in airports, and to extend and to facilitate the trade in and out cross-border with Vietnam and neighboring countries through the the cross-border land routes, also within the countries, within Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, and other provinces. As an advisory firm, so we have seen that the investor we are working with at the moment are really focusing on and are much interested in logistic and infrastructure in Vietnam. And as you may know, in order to invest in a logistic firm company, a good logistic industry will be built on a good infrastructure. And Vietnam, I must say, the Vietnam government has been doing a really good job. And I believe that in the next couple of years, the government will continue to spend more money and invest more in infrastructure. And even though there are some still underdeveloped infrastructure, in terms of digital and other legal frameworks need to be done. But I must say that Vietnam is ready to support the growth and the investment from other countries.
Thank you very much. For sure, this is a topic that all the investor will look at to understand as a support of the full structure for the investment. Thank you very much for the answer. We have next question for Dr. Ashraf, related with the export. So I will try to turn this question a little bit more open to the entire market. So one of our attendees is asking to you, what are the major exports that you see as happening right now, or that you see can grow mainly in between Vietnam and Middle East, or in general to Vietnam?
Okay, thank you very much, Lorenzo. Over the number of trade missions that we have carried out to Vietnam, what we have seen is that trade from the UAE to Vietnam is very diversified. If you look at the current trade data, of course, it's very concentrated towards hydrocarbons, etc., plastics, manufactured goods. But when we look at it from the future perspective, we see a great potential for consumer goods, a lot of FMCG products as well. In fact, many of our companies are now working with the supermarkets there for F&B products, But also that's again because as the palate changes in Vietnam, as taste changes, they want different products. Some of our perfume and cosmetic companies are making inroads in Vietnam. And again, through Volt, we were kind enough to be connected to a number of supermarkets there. So some of our cosmetics and perfume companies are making connections. So we see a great potential in terms of consumer goods, lifestyle, fashion, design, again, appealing to a younger audience, an audience that is open to trying out new products. Sami mentioned digital trade and the fact that digital trade has increased 15%. One of the interesting things that we have found is that a lot of our companies are getting introduction to consumers through digital connectivity and also through social media. We find a lot of our companies are putting their products on social media. This is being picked up in Vietnam, and as a result of which they're actually getting connectivity. So really it's products which are consumer, lifestyle, and FMCG. Lorenzo.
Thank you very much for the answer. And yes, we can say that we see during the last few years a growth of exactly this product, these sectors that you are mentioning. We saw a lot of on the cosmetics too. So thank you very much for the answer, perfectly clear. We have the next question for Sami. This question has been followed by your speech, but one of our guests would like to have a little bit clarification about, in terms of your opinion, about the digital infrastructure in Vietnam, in terms of, again, an infrastructure capable to handling the growth, and if this is also a target for the potential investor to support the growth inside the country through startups or through direct investment.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Look, I'll be very frank. I'm not qualified enough to comment on the current state of the digital infrastructure in Vietnam. We're interested from an outside perspective, actually, to invest in Vietnam's technology infrastructure. So I can tell you, kind of go in a bit more detail as to what I alluded when I was answering the second question as to what we look for. And actually what foreign investors look for in emerging and frontier markets is exactly that. Technology, infrastructure companies. Very simple. Before looking at anything that's on the fringe and is a nice to have content or media or whatever it is, people look for really what has a very strong and defensible moat and what can actually bring tangible value in transferring an old economy, brick and mortar economy, to a digital economy. Some of the things that are very important in that space are fintech, again. Anything that has to do and optimizes bank APIs, security, payments, online payment gateways, and that's why we see VNPay doing so well and raising so much money. Because if VNPay, as it looks like, ends up being the winner, it will capture so much of that digital economy going forward, and so much more of the dongs are going from being traded, being handed over as cash to actually being traded digitally. And so whoever can capture part of that value chain stands to grow tremendously. But that feeds nicely into the marketplaces, right? When you look at Sendo, S-commerce, etc., companies that are enabling e-commerce. E-commerce in Vietnam is still nascent. Let's have this call in 10 years. It's going to look like a very different landscape, right? The proportion of spending or discretionary spend by, as Dr. Ashraf alluded, the most important class, which is the middle class, in 10 years, that proportion, I can't tell you how much because nobody really knows, but it's going to be a lot more digital. Using digital means and digital payment gateways, but also into e-commerce. And then lastly, what is, I think, one of the most appealing sectors or segments within technology is software and enterprise SaaS. Anything that has the ability to command recurring revenue by providing a service for either a corporate enterprise or a consumer would be seen very valuable. So in a nutshell, I think companies that are focusing on Vietnam's digital infrastructure stand to do very, very well, because for foreign investors, this is the first pit stop. This is what they'll be looking for.
Thank you very much. Very clear answer, and for sure really helpful for our attendees and for ourselves, of course. We have the next question for Mr. Ha. We follow very well your last speech, where you spoke about the power that, of course, is another very, very important point and core point for any kind of investment, whatever is the level, startup or any kind of series. A lot of people just asked us to forward to you this question, to have some details specifically about the renewable energies. We know there are a lot of opportunities, but you know, you have the right point of view, you have the knowledge. So is this a core topic? Is it real? Is it something that we need to look at it?
Development of renewable energy in Vietnam is started 4 years ago. And for the last 3-4 years, tremendous growth in terms of the capacity adding to the system. As I remember it right, it's about 5,000 megawatts already added in the system. For solar, most of them, for solar. Wind is not that much, and it's like we call it's really too hot stage. Now it's normalized, and I think a lot of local and foreign investors, they already take advantage, because the government introduced incentive policy for the good tariff, fit-in tariff. So the tariff fixed into 20 years PPA, and then the tariff for solar is 9.35 cents per kilowatt hour. It's like double hydropower for the first 2 years, and now it's a little bit decreased, but still I think 7 cents per kilowatt hour. And similarly, wind is the growth in wind come a little bit 1 or 2 years after that. And we will expect that the renewable energy, I think the growth will normalize in the next 2-3 years. And the tremendous growth will happen in gas-fired thermal power plants. And I think one of the important elements of the power industry in Vietnam is like the tariffs is subsidized. The government, in the past, in the effort to controlling inflation, so they heavily regulated the tariffs. And it's comparing to Asian countries, like the tariff in Vietnam is like 60% or 70% of the tariff in Thailand, Indonesia, and Philippines. But it's one of the important reasons make the demand and supply equation not clear in the market economy way. It's like because of low tariffs, so not much incentive for the investor to coming in to supply more. And if the government already recognize and they gradually increase the tariffs, and also liberalize the market structure, is like very group monopolistic player, by Vietnam Electricity Corporation, Petro Vietnam, and TKV. But it's the three major players. But for investor, join the IPP and some other models, and I think it's account about 15 to 20% of the supply side. But we expect more and more, foreign direct investment in the form of IPP, because for electricity is very capital intensive industry, and in Vietnam, the cost of funding in terms of project financing, loan financing, is very high. So that's why I think in the future, foreign investor will have much more road in joining the power industry, especially doing very capital intensive projects.
Thank you very much for the answer. I'm sure the answer is clear and full for our attendees. We still have few minutes, and we have a lot of questions, so we will try to raise at least one each again. Let me start again with you, Mr. Ha. I'm sorry, but following the flow, and we just received. What is your opinion or suggestion about the food security? So investment in the agriculture, any level of the food security, and there is a specific question about vertical farming, if you have any expertise about it.
Yes, on the question of food security, I think Vietnam, we have no issue in terms of the, food shortage, because we are, one of the world's largest rice exporter, right? And but my view is the potentiality in the agriculture industry. It's like we have very rich land. We have very good climate, and for planting the tree, juice, but we don't have the technology to process the agriculture product into the added value and we sell to the advanced market. I think that is a gap for investors who have good outlet for the added value product, and then come to Vietnam, work with local partner to build a business model and invest in the either shrimp or fish process, or mango or coconut process. You make very delicious juice from the rich agriculture juice in Vietnam and sell in Europe and US. I saw some investor already join and explore, but not that much. I think that's very potential. Yep. Sorry for the second question the audience asked about.
So it's about the food security. So it's perfectly clear. Thank you very much. Yeah. And the attendees already wrote. Thank you very much for the
thank you.
answer. Lovely. Another question for Dr. Ashraf. I'm sorry, it's coming like a surprise, but they are coming all together, and I want to pick the right one. So we have this question: what is the role of FDI in Vietnamese socio-economic development?
Actually, that's a very interesting question. And when we look at social FDI, we find that it takes place in two different ways. Firstly, there's social investment in the sectors in which it flows. So we have seen a lot of social investment in terms of creating employment in certain sectors. We already talked about FDI coming from the UAE in hospitality, in construction, also in manufacturing. But also the other aspect of social investment, and again, I think Sammy talked about this when he talked about the seed capital that they feed into, and what type of sectors they actually invest in. A lot of technology-based investment and technology-based FDI actually has a way of improving HCI, or that's the Human Capital Index. It's also into healthcare. It's also into education. So again, and now when we talk about education, it's not only bricks and mortar. Education is digital, right? And again, so the investment has the social impact investment is done in very different ways. And one of the things that we tend to measure nowadays when we look at FDI is what's the social, economic social impact of a particular FDI. So really, it's not only about dollars flowing into a country, but it's what do these dollars actually do to the host nation, right? And when I first started looking at FDI many years ago, we always used to look at in terms of employment, we used to look at in terms of technology transfer. And again, technology transfer into many different sectors is a positive impact. But now we look at how does it improve the living standards, the lifestyles, the salaries, and also the conditions of the host nation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have another question also for Juan. Okay. So you spoke about very clearly about the government strategy, the support, and also the role of the private sector in general. I have a specific question, but please try to give an answer based on your experience, of course, personal experience, business experience, and knowledge. What are the incentives from the government to establish, in particular, factories? So one of our attendees, he was asking specifically for steel sector, but this depends on a lot of details, of course. But in general, factories. We have also a lot of our investment partners that are looking for the right country where to establish factories.
Okay. Thank you, Lorenzo, for the questions. In order to set up a factory of all kinds, from steel to other industries in Vietnam, it really depends on the industry that the investor are looking at. And from my experience and my knowledge, there are several critical points that the investor can be mindful about. And the first thing is to set up a factory is that I believe that the investor needs to find a trust and the right local partners. The local partners, Vietnam's, I mean, it could be the investing companies, or it could be an advisory partner that could help the investor with the legal paperwork and the set up things in Vietnam. You know, because if the total new investor coming into Vietnam to set up a factory, I must say there will be a lot of challenging in administrative procedures, especially legal paperwork and things so on. And that's the first thing. The second thing is to set up a factory. They will need to obtain the required licensing for the area or the industry they are looking at. Especially for the steel industry, there are also some special legal paperwork and license that the investor needs to apply for, and it could take some time to get it done. And third will be to find a land or to lease a space at the industrial zones. The third thing will be, I believe, will be much easier at the moment because, as far as I know, the Vietnams are opening up a lot of industrial zones in industrial parks that are very easy for access to foreign investors. And having said that, I would like to sum up with one critical point that I would like to affirm is to have a right local partner. It could be the investing company, it could be an advisory, or it could be the legal firm agency that you can trust, that they could help you to penetrate into Vietnam's market much faster and much easier and less costly.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the answer. We have a last question for, of course, our friend Sami. We have a lot of people that they are trying to get more details from what you already spoke about in your speech and in the previous question. So they want to get more details from you, so they are really interested. So one question, I'll try to summarize one of these questions. Basically, this attendee is asking you, like probably mainly like an investor than an expert general in startups, what sort of technologies investment you would like to jump in Vietnam? Someone is mentioning also possibility about disruptive, innovative solution for the environmental friendly new culture, new solution. But probably like more an investor, or what you would like to jump in?
Yeah, thanks, Lorenzo. Look, you know, the sectors that we were interested in, I covered in the previous question. All right, so mainly digital infrastructure. When people are seeking more details, I assume they're seeking paths to potential capital. And so what I would say is, look, we're very open, and the way we collaborate, we work with a group of global partners. We wouldn't be able to do all the investments that we've done in 3 years if we weren't working with people that we've developed strong and as Quan mentioned, trusted relationships. We would not make one investment in Vietnam ourselves, just, you know, out of the blue. We would only do it with funds that are based in Vietnam, with whom we have developed relationships with, etc. And we are starting to develop a strong relationship with one of the new prominent technology funds. In fact, Sultan, I'll put you in touch with them soon, who are doing some very interesting things there, and we're involved in the 500 startup ecosystem. So look, in terms of what we would like to invest in, that's been covered. I think in terms of parting thoughts, here are a few things that I will say. One, as has been mentioned by Ha and Quan, you know, the trade war, the US-China trade war is really a seminal moment for Vietnam. It's really been a blessing in disguise. Also, over the last decade, we've seen a huge price inflation coming from the manufacturing space in China. The quality has improved in China, and so there's been price inflation. And this is pricing a lot of companies out. And so Vietnam, I think, is incredibly well positioned to capture some of that latent demand. You know, looking into technology of late, in the last few weeks, what we've seen in Vietnam from large companies, Microsoft has played a key role in enabling students to learn from home. And there's been, you know, an incredible shift of learn from home in Vietnam. 22 million students in Vietnam over the last few months have been using technology to continue their various curricula online. Just about a month ago, Qualcomm set up their R&D facility in Hanoi, really to target 5G chipset production and IoT products. It's their first R&D center in Southeast Asia. Vietnam was the recipient of that. So look, I mean, I think the future is very bright for Vietnam. I'll close by saying, you know, thank you, Sultan, Lorenzo, and the Volt team for organizing this. People who are in Vietnam, who focus in Vietnam, you should rejoice. Great days are ahead. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And it's obviously our pleasure. I'll give the speech to Mr. Sultan for the conclusion. Thank you very much from my side and from Wealth Management Consultants.
Thanks everybody for your insights on Vietnam. We reached to a conclusion that Vietnam is a promising country. It's booming fast in various sectors, led by technology. We reached to a conclusion that technology now is a driver of all other investments. Technology went into all sectors. It's with post-COVID-19, it played a main role in driving all sectors. Let us say F&B, logistics, even real estate. Everything is driven by technology now. And Vietnam showed a huge and tremendous growth in the field of technology, empowered it by enhancing the economical growth in the country in various sectors. I see Vietnam as a role model in dealing with COVID, which made investors think positively and aggressively in investing in Vietnam. Numbers talks, it's all around the news. Investors are shifting from different countries due to the COVID-19 issues and how Vietnam dealt with it smartly. The other one, as Sami just mentioned, the trade war and trying to diversify the investment and the investment structure to be more diversified than only sticking into a certain country or an environment. Thanks everybody. Thanks Mr. Haas. Thanks Dr. Ashraf. Thanks Mr. Sami. Thanks Mr. Kwan. You had grateful insights to this webinar. And I'd like to thank all the attendees who participated with us today. We'll be having more sessions. We'll be updating you on our media tools on the coming sessions. Thanks everybody and have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sultan. Bye-bye.